A piece of paper, no matter how prestigious it is, isn't going to guarantee you a job ever. What's going to guarantee you a job is work ethic and really believing in yourself and getting up and trying again and again and again.
This is like the 21st century religion. This is like the white middle class work ethic religion.
Yes, it sucks sometimes, and yes, it's hard, but at the end of the day, completing it makes you a better person. If you are dropping out of university, if you have dropped out of university, or whatever it is, that is not money wasted. I remember when I quit university, I was bawling, and I basically said to my dad, I feel like I wasted a bunch of money, and my dad said, did you learn something? And I said, well, yeah, of course I did, and he said, well, then it wasn't money wasted.
Aren't you open to the idea that some people learned nothing, or some people learned so little that they can't justify $50,000 worth of debt?
In my personal opinion, there is no such thing as a going nowhere degree. Even if your degree isn't going to directly translate into a job, it doesn't mean that that doesn't help you learn who you are and learn what your contribution to this world is.
Doesn't that sound a little bit too much like an impossible to prove religious concept and not something we could ever pin down and measure as true, false, or halfway true or false in the social sciences? Did you find your true self? Did you figure out who you were supposed to be and the positive contribution you made to the world? Yes, no, maybe.
So 40% of people who set out to get a bachelor's degree drop out. I am one of those 40%.
In different cultures around the world, human beings have always created rituals to mark the transition from childhood to adulthood. I remember once seeing a documentary film of a young man in Papua New Guinea who had to be stung by about 100 bees and then do a ritual dance next to a fireplace to prove that he was no longer a boy but a man, and he had to show no pain, no weeping or whatever when he was stung by these bees or hornets or whatever they were. And the shaman prepared for this ritual. They would take the bees and trap them in a kind of woven fabric, trap them alive, and then wrap it around the young man's hand like a glove. He would dance with this glove on his hand that was full of stinging hornets. If this sounds barbaric to you, let me just remind you, I'm half Jewish. Judaism, they still have this great idea. It has to do with cutting off part of your penis. That's the difference between being a child and being a man. Wow, who thought of that? Male circumcision, female circumcision. Gee, you know what? I'll go with the bee stinging ceremony. Okay? But in our culture today, I think we do have magical attitudes towards university, towards college education. And we have to every so often stop and challenge ourselves. What is it that we believe is so special? What is it that's supposed to make a man out of us in all this weeping and dancing and bee venom?
In my personal opinion, there is no such thing as a going nowhere degree. Even if your degree isn't going to directly translate into a job, it doesn't mean that that doesn't help you learn who you are and learn what your contribution to this world is.
But if that were true, it would be falsifiable, right? So without getting into a huge digression into Karl Popper and the philosophy of science and the concept of falsifiability, right? Doesn't that sound a little bit too much like an impossible to prove religious concept and not something we could ever pin down and measure as true, false, or halfway true or false in the social sciences? Did you find your true self? Did you figure out who you were supposed to be and the positive contribution you made to the world? Yes, no, maybe.
Learn who you are. Learn what your contribution to this world is.
Do you think we can poll college graduates? Do you think, how would anyone know if this were true for themselves? How would we know if it were true or false for others? I gotta say something to you. For me, subjectively, what she's describing here and throughout the rest of the video, none of it was true. I don't see any of this value in college. And when I look at the other people in the classroom with me, thinking back to when I studied the philosophy of Plato, that was a small classroom. There was not a single student in the class who was getting more out of being forced to study the philosophy of Plato than I was. But it's so easy to commit to this kind of coming of age mythology. Like, oh no, this is where you discover your true self. This is where you gain mysterious, magical abilities like so-called critical thinking. And when somebody asks you to define what critical thinking is and how we can actually test whether or not you have it, right? What if someone asks you to define knowing who you really are and your life's purpose and so on? And can we actually test who didn't have that at the start of college and did gain it from college? And where did they pick it up along the way? Was it intro to English literature? Was it being forced to read Shakespeare's sonnets? Was it the process of sitting in a room and discussing homoerotic imagery in Shakespeare's sonnets? Was that what did it for you? When exactly did the bee stings help you make the transition from being a boy into a man? I'm being sincere when I say this. A lot of people are living with unexamined hocus pocus about what college is supposed to be and what for each of us and all of us it really is.
Just because you're getting a humanities degree doesn't mean that you aren't going to do something important later on, as long as you put in the effort and the work once you figure out what you want to do. I personally think university is a great place for people to network, figure out who they are, figure out work ethic, and figure out how to think critically.
So this is the part I completely disagree with. And let's be clear, there's some things here I sympathize with. Anisa Jomha is trying to turn her own life around. You'll see, she's reflecting on the fact that she dropped out of university herself and she regrets it. She'd like to go back to school now, so on and so forth. If you think that networking is a reason to go back to university, you're dead wrong. And I went to what is, in theory, the most elite university in Canada. Okay, I went to University of Toronto, Canada, and I guess that must be worth something on my CV now. But supposedly, that's the best of the best. What kind of networking are you going to do sitting in a classroom with a bunch of sullen teenagers who are staring at their phones and who are being forced to read the philosophy of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, who are sitting there going, I don't even know why I have to read this anyway. My parents forced me to major in political science so I could be a lawyer afterwards. Now I have to read this crap for major. I don't even know what's supposed to be interested with it. Dude, that's who you're sitting there with. You're sitting there with a bunch of people who have absolutely no interest in what the professor is saying until the bell rings at the end of the hour and he starts talking about the football game that's coming up in the weekend. Then they all sit up. I've been in that situation. I've been in that situation where the other students, they get interested when the professor starts talking about football. It's like, damn. This is what you're paying tens of thousands of dollars for? You're in the classroom, people dragging their feet through this. You cannot hope or expect to find colleagues or intellectual equals or any worthwhile people among the students. The hardest thing to accept of all is that you can't even expect to find worthwhile people behind the podium amongst the professors. Because just as bored as the students may be with the philosophy of Plato, 9 times out of 10, the professor also is bored, also has no interest. And if you get to know the professor, he's going to tell you something similar that's sulky, like, oh, well, I did my PhD thesis on the philosophy of Hegel. I don't know why I'm forced to teach this class about Plato. I don't even want to be here. You know, I had a fight with the administrator for the department, and now I have to teach this stupid class I don't even want to teach. No, obviously, I'm an older dude, but even when I was a kid, even when I was a teenager, I used to talk to professors about how did this course end up on the schedule? How did you end up teaching it? Dude, really, it can be that bad. You cannot go to a department of political science and expect to meet even one person who's interested in politics. Not one student, not one professor. And I mean that about elite level universities, even more than about kind of run-of-the-mill, average or middle grade universities. I was in a department, okay, and you might think, oh, well, that's only true of subjects that people are studying because they want to make money. Like you go to a department of dentistry and nobody's really interested in dentistry, they just want to make money. No. I was in a department studying Cree and Ojibwe, First Nations languages, indigenous languages. You might think, oh, the only people you'll meet there will be really passionate about studying those languages. No. I did not meet one person who wanted to study the language amongst all the students, and I had a special meeting with 2 of the professors. They were encouraging me to get a master's degree and PhD in the department. And I said to them, look, I can't study a language if there isn't even one other person for me to talk to. Do you know a single student other than myself who actually wants to learn this language? And they both sat there, and they were both pretty sullen and mopey, and they both said, no. So you can be in a department of classical ancient Greek philosophy where there's not a single other student interested in that. You can be in a department of something obscure like Korean and Japan. I have been in a department of Asian studies where nobody is interested in the history or politics of Asia. You know, and each one of them, when you get to know the students, they have a different reason for why they're there. There was one, she flunked out of chemistry. Oh, well, I flunked out of the chemistry program. I didn't know what to do. I already speak Chinese, so I decided to get a degree in Chinese literature. She doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to. So do not take this mythology and make out of it an expectation that you impose on the other students in that classroom.
These are all things that are very hard to learn in life, and things that university just automatically bestows on you if you give it a chance.
What a claim. So, you know, again, you've got to think about Karl Popper's criterion of falsifiability. Do you really think that critical thinking is something that people lack who haven't been to university and that people have bestowed upon them by university? And if so, how would we test for that, right? What is the test? What is the exam for these other nebulous qualities people supposedly acquire in university? Because I've got to tell you something. I've met people who dropped out of college, and I've met people who dropped out of high school who are much more intelligent than other people who have PhDs, right? And some of you in the audience, you may not have that experience. I really have that experience, okay? I've known some unbelievably stupid people with PhDs from elite universities. It's real, okay? Getting a PhD, it's mostly a test of how much money your family has, how willing they are to part with it, and the extent to which you as a student are just a gormless conformist, the extent to which you're a spineless pushover who's just going to go with the flow in the system. That's about all it's testing. It's not testing your intelligence, creativity, verve, tenacity. It's not even testing your hard work. It's not. But what is critical thinking or any of these other things? You know, if you can't measure it, it probably doesn't exist, not any more than an openly religious concept like being saved or enlightened, right? And this is some sense of being a person who has a sense of purpose and mission and guidance in life that she's saying you gain by going to university. And I don't know how many thousands of people do I know who've been through this and who come out, you know, really brokenhearted because they lack all of those things and they feel they didn't gain any of this going to university.
So 40% of people who set out to get a bachelor's degree drop out. I am one of those 40%.
So this is the part I sympathize with.
And as much as I'd like to say that I have zero regrets, that would be a lie, because I have a lot of them. I was in university for 3 years, and it taught me an amazing amount of being able to see the world in a creative and different way and be able to question the things around me.
That's interesting. I'm not going to discount her experience. If you really believe that really is your experience at university, that's interesting, and I'd like to know more. But for a lot of people, our experience was, I showed up and I got a bunch of like insane lectures that just reflected the like specialized monomania of the professor. So like in English literature, you happen to have one professor who was obsessed with homoerotic imagery in Shakespeare. And maybe it's not that. Maybe, I don't know if you guys know, there's a thesis that Shakespeare was secretly Catholic. And these people who go through all the texts and they collect the little bits and pieces that suggest Shakespeare sympathized with the Catholic Church, not the Protestant Church, and they put, you know, if that was what your professor was obsessed with, you spent hours and hours hearing about this, you know, complete nonsense that had no real use even within the world of English literature. It's just indulging that professor's personal obsession and monomania. A lot of us come out with a patchwork of these eccentric, meaningless experiences and of having to conform to the whims of that professor in order to get a decent grade on an exam that in the end we learned nothing from, or we walked away saying, oh, all I've learned is how to sit in a room with a really broken human being and listen to them talk about their personal pet project, you know? And if you think that gets less depressing in the Department of Political Science, where there are consequences involving dead bodies and so on, I would say it's much more depressing. I certainly resent much more being lied to about real history with a real body count than being lied to just about how you interpret a poem, you know. And I've really had to sit through that. And you know, I try different try different things. Sometimes I try to challenge professors. Sometimes I try to be the one using Socratic method. And sometimes I try to go with the flow just to see what would happen. What if I go with the professor? Where's this going to lead us? Yeah. And you know what my conclusion is? You can't win. And what does winning mean? Winning means learning in this instance. I think winning means getting an education. And my experience with the university system is there is no way to get an education out of this system. I really mean that. And as brokenhearted as I may be by my own experience with the university system, the other irony is it's only people like me that the system works for. It's people with my work ethic, people who can be a total autodidact, people who can just take the library card, go to the library, do the research, write the paper with zero guidance from the professor and zero feedback, and people who can be satisfied that I did good research and I wrote it up and I published it all by myself. Those are the people who can benefit from the system as it exists now. And that's me. And it's not people like Anisa, whatever preferred pronunciation is, like Anisa is describing here, kind of aimless teenagers. I mean, those I think are people who are really set up to fail by the system. If you're dragging your feet when you walk through the library door, you shouldn't be at university at all. We got a stack of books here. Sorry, I could actually put the books on camera, but let's not bother. But I said to Melissa the other day, I had like just 3 or 4 books on a set of topics in the history of China. I said, honestly, if you just look at these 3 or 4 books, Melissa, if you really sit down and read these and took notes, if you really studied these 4 books thoroughly, you would learn more than you'd learn in a university degree from here, University of Victoria in Asian Studies. If you really learn with these books. And that's the truth. Most people go through 4 years and they don't really learn as much as you'd read in a thorough, detailed examination of a small stack of, like, say, 4 really good books that are all on the same kind of overlapping, specialized subject of that. And I know it. And look, something that always surprised me most, I really talk to people on campus. Like, most of the classes I took at UVic, I spoke to and got to know, like, every single student in the classroom. And when I was at University of Toronto, in the smaller classes, too, because I had a lot of classes that were only 11 students, that kind of thing. You get a sense. Most people are not doing the reading. They're neither a critic of the course, nor they're neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. But attending classes and writing essays is this kind of unwanted punctuation in a kind of 4-year vacation in their lives. That's most of what I see around me. And that's the other aspect of Anisa's praise of university that seems very alien to me, is that she says this instills work ethic. So she already said that you then gain this work ethic. What work ethic? What are you talking about? Everyone I know who goes to university, I think the worst thing is that it lulls them into this tremendous laziness. It's 4 years where you have much less of a work ethic than you'd have working at Starbucks, let alone joining the military or something.
The thing that's really disappointing to me is I feel like I quit university not because I had better and greater things to do. I quit it because it was not for me, because I didn't want to put in the effort. And for whatever reason, in my dumb ape child brain, I was like, I would rather work 2 jobs than go to school. And to be honest, I took it for granted. That being said, if you are dropping out of university, if you have dropped out of university or whatever it is, that is not money wasted. I remember when I quit university, I was bawling and I basically said to my dad, I feel like I wasted a bunch of money. And my dad said, did you learn something? And I said, well, yeah, of course I did. And he said, well, then it wasn't money wasted.
So for me, that's got to be falsifiable, right? What did you learn? And aren't you open to the idea that some people learned nothing, or some people learned so little that they can't justify $50,000 worth of debt for what it is they learned? You can't just dogmatically state everyone learns critical thinking, everyone learns a work ethic, or everyone makes great colleagues. It's the most mind-blowing claim of all. Colleagues that are going to carry you through your career. Really? I know a lot of people who went to law school and didn't come out with a single friend. I know a lot of people who, law school, med school, people who studied psychiatry, people who studied philosophy, came out without a single friend or colleague, without one other person who's even interested in philosophy or the same area of philosophy. Boy, let's not even get into religious studies. It's a real hothouse. But if that's the claim you're going to make is, well, you learned something, and learning something, anything, is worth any price. Obviously, there's no way anyone could live with that if you took that seriously, if you really took her at her word.
A piece of paper, no matter how prestigious it is, isn't going to guarantee you a job ever. What's going to guarantee you a job is work ethic and really believing in yourself and getting up and trying again and again and again. I think that it's not about the piece of paper that you get at the end of it. I think it's everything else that you get during it.
This is like the 21st century religion. This is like the white middle class work ethic religion. Like, what are you going to say? Sorry, I mean, Anisa and I both, I think neither one of us counts as white. She's half Arab. I'm half Jewish. We're probably half cousins, 3 times removed in this, whatever. But I mean, I was applying for jobs today where the only thing that mattered was my university diploma. That was it. And you had to click a box. I have a university diploma that's relevant. I have a university diploma that's irrelevant. That's not one of the subjects they want. And then I don't have a university diploma, but I have an excuse. You could fill in that box. There was a checklist for you to click on with job. Nope. And, the other thing, this has come up, even with some of the jobs I applied for today, so it's come up in conversation. There are jobs where I just say to my girlfriend straight up, look, they'd hire you, but not me. They'd hire a cute female. They'd hire a good-looking female, but not a scary-looking dude. Physical appearance. I mean, again, that's why I said white, middle-class American religion. I think black people in America are just much more acutely aware of the extent to which your appearance just utterly shapes your fate in the free market to an unbelievable extent. But nothing could be less true. I mean, sorry. Yes, a piece of paper matters. I mean, yeah, it's not that having a piece of paper is desirable. It's that it's a requirement, right? There were jobs I was applying for in Taiwan, and it's like, oh no, if you don't have this piece of paper, then the government won't give you the work visa so you can legally live here and stay here and do this job. So do you think you can be a school teacher? Do you think you can be a kindergarten teacher? Do you think you can be a nurse? Do you think you can be a doctor? If you were the client, if you were the customer, would you hire someone to be the architect who designs your home if they don't have a piece of paper saying they're an architect? Would you pay someone to cut you open and perform heart surgery on you if they didn't have a piece of paper saying they were qualified to be a surgeon? On and on it goes. And the terrifying thing is, it reaches down to the humblest, most pathetic, most pitiable of jobs. The tyranny of pieces of paper, of having required certificates and degrees. You can't get a job as a dishwasher here without getting a series of pieces of paper, right? You have to get your food safe diploma. There's this series of safety and hygiene diplomas you get from the government and so on, just to wash dishes in the back of a restaurant. So no, we're living in the era when, the tyranny of appearances is one thing, but then sure, the tyranny of pieces of paper. I don't think I'm going to be offered a single job I apply for today. I don't think a single one's going to respond positively. But if they do, it'll be because I had that diploma, I had the right university diploma for the job, and there weren't 10 other people who had the same diploma. That's, not enough people showed up on that particular day to apply for that particular job.
I think that it's not about the piece of paper that you get at the end of it. I think it's everything else that you get during it. That being said, if you value the opportunities that come from post-secondary, and you value the feeling of completion, and you value having a little bit of guidance and a kind of a transition period into adulthood, by all means, keep doing university, keep pushing on, because it does not hurt to have some sort of work ethic instilled into you. It's the same as somebody who goes into the army or anything else. It's
not. In university, you wake up whenever you want to wake up. You go to class when you want to go to class. She mentioned that she only went to about 40% of her classes. So she said she had this amazing transformative experience that gave her critical thinking skills through the rest of her life, but you only went to 40% of your classes. You get drunk when you want to get drunk. You get stoned when you want to get stoned. I'm sorry, but people lead really dissolute lives in university, and university has a tremendously corrupting influence, specifically on white Americans in the United States of America. I mean, I'm not going to generalize. Probably university in Saudi Arabia. Not university campuses in Iran. not quite the same. But no, the idea of university being this kind of garden of earthly delights, that even our campus here, why does it look the way it does? Why do university campuses need to have palatial gyms and swimming pools and nightclubs? There's a nightclub right in the middle of UVic campus, right? Why do they have these palatial gardens? It's much closer to visiting the Palace of Versailles. It's much closer to visiting like an 18th century aristocrat's playground, right? Than it is a place of learning or training, right? So you can even see that in the architecture and the layout of the fields, what it is that people are signing up for. Again, okay, if you believe this, let's think like Karl Popper. Let's think scientifically, all right? There must be some way to prove the opposite. There must be something falsifiable here. If you really believe that people getting a bachelor's degree in English literature learn a good work ethic, we have to be able to test that hypothesis, right? And even if it's true for 1% or 10% of people, I don't know what percentage it is, we've got to be able to come up through social science research methods with what percentage of people it's true for and what percentage is false for. And Anisa, I've got to tell you, I think for the vast majority of people, university does not give them an improved work ethic. It might, all things considered, make them worse off in terms of work ethic.
Yes, it sucks sometimes, and yes, it's hard, but at the end of the day, completing it makes you a better person. So I guess this is also an announcement video that I will keep doing YouTube, but I am applying for universities again. I would like to finish my degree. I got my transcripts, so this is just something that's important for me. I hope that this helps some people in some way. It was kind of just me yelling at the camera. But, yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time, whenever that is. But until then, peace.
So I don't know how this story ends. I don't know if Anisa went back to university and finally had her heart broken. But, I think each of us is kind of burdened with an ideal of what education ought to be. And I think probably each of us is burdened with an ideal of what being an adult ought to be. And university appeals to these overlapping senses of idealism. And what an appealing notion that all I have to do is put on this wicker glove and get stung by 100 bees and do a magical dance in front of a fire, and I'm no longer a child, I'm an adult now. This has become this defining ritual that draws a line between, the unrefined ruffians of high school and the presumably polished, economically upwardly mobile, middle-class, university-educated adult. And if you just pause to ask for 1 minute, what did you learn? What did you learn in university? I think it opens up a whole strange world of recriminations that most of us don't want to get into, because then we end up reflecting on just how great the gulf is between that ideal of what education ought to be and what it is we actually received. Shout out to Anisa Jomha. I'd be interested to know how this story ends. Did she actually go back to university? Did she actually finish her degree? And having done that, and having sat in the classroom with those other people who are dragging their feet and showing up to class hungover and stoned and playing with their cell phones during the lectures and have their laptops open and are like shopping for clothing and shoes during the professor's lecture, endemic on university campus. Maybe if she actually did go back and have this experience, maybe she'd have to re-examine her own idealism and realize, simply put, things are not what they seem.